Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a brand spanking Happy Thanksgiving episode of the Console Log number 56. We have Matthew Gersman back from his travels around the world. He is a globe trotter that's now trotted back home. Hey, welcome back, Matthew.
Thank you. I am so excited that I have trotted back home. Fun fact, they don't have iced coffee in places that are not the United States.
That is a tragedy of errors and commons for Matthew.
I missed iced coffee so much. And just ice. I love ice.
Ice, baby. This is Console Log episode number 56, past week from November 14th through November 20th. We are in the thick of November, and we have some thick news. I don't know why it's thick, but it's definitely news.
Funny story. So I plotted out the outline for this podcast, or this episode, I should say. And I was on the phone with a friend talking about a dating app while I was doing it. And I slowly start reading out loud, like, highlights from the episode that you're about to hear. And my friend goes, "Are you planning the worst first date ever, or are you now talking about your podcast?"
A common misconception, one that I always try to avoid as well. Let's get on with the dating show.
Our first update is that HTTP 3 is a spec that's happening, which is so exciting. So for those of you who may or may not remember, HTTP is the primary protocol that we use to transmit hypertext or HTML over the internet. It is the Hypertext Transport Protocol. And for many, many years, we were on HTTP 1.0 and then 1.1. And 1.1 lasted about a decade, maybe a decade and a half. It felt like a really long time. And then about 5 years ago, HTTP 2 became a thing, and that was based on a protocol called Speedy that Google had produced. What'd you say, Harry?
So speedy.
It was so speedy. The thing about HTTP 2 was that it allowed multiplexing assets over connections. So pretty much just all of the best practices of the web changed.
What does multiplexing assets over connections mean, Matthew?
Sure. So before, the way you would do things is you would want to have as few connections as possible, because the browser would just be like, hey, like you're only allowed to do like 4 things at once. You're only allowed to request 4 things at once. So people would do really ridiculous things like pack all of their icons into a font and then use that custom font to display all the icons on their page. And we were much more concerned about bundling just all of our JavaScript so we could get a cache hit, as opposed to code splitting. We just didn't code split at that point in time.
Like before, like we're always concerned about size of things you're transmitting, but before with HTTP 1, we were also concerned about how many transfers themselves we were making. Each transfer has some overhead, and that's why HTTP 1.1 was no bueno.
Yeah, so now we are moving on to HTTP 3, which is not officially spec'd out yet. It is very early stage. It is based on a protocol from Google called Quick, because the last one was Speedy and that wasn't fast enough, so now it's Quick, QUIC. And the most interesting thing about HTTP 3 is that they are implementing it on top of UDP. So there is UDP, yeah. So there's UDP and TCP. Hey Harry, do you want me to tell you about TCP?
Yeah, tell me about all the P's.
I'm gonna tell you about TCP.
The real old P?
You know, you're fucking this up.
I know, that's fine.
So anyway, TCP, the server and the client are like, hey, will you tell me about TCP? The client's like, yeah, I'll tell you about TCP. And then the server is like, okay, now tell me about TCP. And then the client is like, okay, now I'm going to start. And then the client does start. And it's just like, it's a lot of back and forth. And this is all done at the very low-level network layer, and this is also before authentication occurs, whereas UDP is like, let's just start issuing packets in order, and we don't really care what order they show up in or if they drop, which is why UDP tends to be used for things like video streams or like gameplay, whereas TCP is, so when you want exact order to be perfect. So the interesting thing about HTTP 3 or Quick is that it is going to be implemented on top of UDP as opposed to TCP. So it is going to include security or encryption in the actual protocol itself at the very beginning, like when the server and the client are doing their handshake. And then the other kind of interesting thing is tons and tons of, I don't even want to call it legacy, because it's just like the router I have in my apartment just like makes a lot of assumptions about UDP and TCP that are about to become invalid. So I'm really interested to see what happens with this spec. The TLDR for our users is that the web will probably get faster, and that some best practices might change as a result of this. But yeah, it's just interesting work that's happening in the low-level web.
We're on version. I mean, I remember we did Web 1.0, Web 2.0. I'm glad that we're Web 3.0, and now we have HTTP 3.0. So I'm glad that those are in lockstep, not that they have any relation to each
I
other
don't think those
at
are in
all.
lockstep.
Are we on Web 4.0? I don't even. I sleep, and then the next time there's a new generation of the web.
I think we stopped numbering the web. I think somewhere in there we were like, let's just put out the Web 2.0 S and
I
then
mean,
just
it
see
just
what
all
happens.
moves. I mean, it moves so fast, and then it happens so asynchronously, which
Oh
brings us to our
God.
next lovely topic, with segues that we labor over so much. If you'd like our segues, by the way, thank you everyone out there who said hi to us on Twitter and everywhere. That was so appreciated. I don't think I actually said that, but that was great.
Yeah, someone actually asked me for help debugging an Uglify error, and I'm going to be honest, I was not qualified to help fix that bug, but I felt really good that someone was reaching out to me about it.
We got one half of that equation. We'll work on the second half soon. So the V8 being the JavaScript interpreter for Chrome, had a nice new blog post about the work they're doing to make async functions faster natively. Async functions being syntactic sugar for dealing with promises. So you can say async, declare a function as async, and then await inside that function, as opposed to having to do promise change, which can produce pyramids and nestedness of pain. V8 has been spending a lot of time optimizing the actual engine itself, such that if you use native async await and not transpile it with Babel, you will now have pretty much what is it? Near equal speed. Actually, no, faster speed than Babel itself.
Yeah, what I kind of find funny about this is so it's great that async await is going to be optimized in the browser, and at some point we will finally start serving async await code to our clients. But the vast majority of us are still down compiling to ES5, and a lot of the time we don't have the bandwidth to serve both ES5 and ES6. I mean that bandwidth term in engineering resources as opposed to literal bandwidth, but I guess both are relevant. So what I just find funny is that using async await produces roughly 45 lines of code to downcompile to ES5. So these 2 lines of code are way faster if you're actually serving them, but no one is going to be doing that. They're going to be serving ES5. So I don't know. It's
I
interesting.
mean, it's good that
But
V8's still pushing things forward. Uh, Node users will definitely love this.
yeah, that is very true. It'll be great for the server. And at some point, we will all be sending down ES6, some point in the very far future. Not even ES6, ES Next, as we've discussed, and it will get better. Um,
I mean, I think it can. I think it can get better.
yeah, I mean, it's got to fly though, and for that you need fairy dust.
Mm.
Yeah, which thankfully there's Tinkerbell or yeah. So
That was a
oh, I just failed that. Anyway,
that was a great segue. I'm very happy about that one.
thank you. So, Tink is a new package unwinder from the NPM team. Effectively, the NPM team want to change a lot of the underlying assumptions with the way package management is done in JavaScript, and instead of modifying the npm package and making a ton of breaking changes, they are working on a brand new project called Tink, which I think should be short for Tinkerbell, regardless of whatever their intentions are. And it is the most interesting thing about it is that it stores a cache of your modules that you've already downloaded, much like Yarn has started doing recently. So anyway, package management is getting interesting. Harry, do you have any more thoughts?
I mean, it's just great to see this. I mean, the biggest pain point that I see people new to JavaScript coming in with NPM is just dealing and wrangling with dependencies. And dependency management is hard by default. And kind of not throwing out, but kind of rethinking all the knowledge gained over, I guess, a decade of working with NPM, both NPM and Yarn, and trying to think of a better way of doing things, I think is just, it's the perfect time to do this. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And Yeah, I totally agree. And package management has always it's always a thing. It's there's an old standing joke. Hey Harry, you remember? Let's go with Bower. You remember Bower?
Oh yeah,
How did you install Bower?
I don't remember.
I'll tell you. You typed npm install Bower, and then how
Oh,
did you install npm? Because you know what npm is. It's another package manager, and you install that with brew. It's like, well, how do you install brew? Oh, you use gems. How do you install gems? Oh, well, you got to install the Xcode library, and it
it's
was just
turtles
like this
all the
like
way
tree
down.
of package management, which we still kind of have, but it's getting a lot better.
It's just a hard problem, and I envy not and the people that are working on this. I think the funniest thing about npm, the CLI itself, is that because it is itself the package manager, it actually has to check in all of this dependencies into the repo because it can't npm install them. Like that's where it stops. You check out the npm/cli repo, all the packages are checked. They're all vendored. They're all checked into the repo because what else can you do?
I just assumed they would just like always use the previous version of npm, kind of the way like like Go used to be compiled with C, and now Go is compiled with Go.
That still blows my mind. I don't understand it, but whatever.
Yeah. Anyway, speaking of languages, TypeScript has just announced their 3.2 release candidate, which does not seem to be that big of a release. Although we do have a couple of exciting things. There is object spread on generic types. That one is actually going to be a huge pain point, especially for like props collection, which is nice. Along with object rest on generic types. So if you're doing like generic stuff with higher order components, that'll be a nice way to work with that. They're also going to start supporting bigints, which I'm interested to see how that down compiles. I don't know if they're going to. I don't even know
I
how
have
you
no
would implement
idea.
that.
It's a good question.
Um, yeah, and they are just working on. They've shipped a few other things. This is a minor release. It's 3.2, but it's always exciting.
Yeah, but you can't really read into the releases of TypeScript. They don't really follow Semver quite strictly. I
Yeah,
think I'm
that's
excited
true.
about they have a new strict bind call apply option that you can opt in for more strictness with TypeScript, which is kind of the neat culmination of like I think over a year's worth of work trying to create primitives in TypeScript to allow them to actually model JavaScript behavior in a type safe way with having this be a parameter type in TypeScript 2.0 and then modeling parameter lists with tuple types in the recently TypeScript 3.0 and now they can actually have this new strictness. So it's just always it's cool to see how the groundwork is laid so far in the future to allow for eventual culmination. And I mean, you see that when you make applications and companies. Like you need feature A before you can do feature B. But then when you use feature A and B, you can make feature C. And when you have feature C, it's not as big as an ocean because C's are smaller than oceans. And now I'm getting nautical.
You know, I was just by the Mediterranean Sea and the Dead Sea, and I have to say the Mediterranean Sea is much more lively.
It's much more hopping.
um,
Speaking of things that you can see that have great views, let's talk about View 3.0.
do it.
By the way, if you like our segues, please let us know your favorite ones. Also, please let us know your least favorite ones. I will love to include your comments and reactions to our segues because aside from the news, that's what we have, our segues. We are not sponsored by Segway, but if Segway would like to give us segues, we will happily ride those segues and actually make segues between our shows.
I actually don't think I would ride a Segway.
Oh, I would
I'm
absolutely ride
not
a
a.
Segway.
I would ride a scooter, but not a Segway.
Well, Segway makes scooters now.
Oh, cool. I'll ride a Segway brand scooter.
You know all those Bird and Lime scooters? I think those are made by Segway.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, mind blown, huh? Read this whole great
Yeah.
article about it, like how the original creator of Segway, like they pretty much tried to do too much, then they didn't, and then they got sold to one guy, then sold to this other company who's now just like crushing it, and like it's whatever.
Tell
I'm
me
not
about
gonna.
the views from the Segway, Harry.
Yeah, thank you for getting me back on topic. Vue.js, huge framework that's big around the world. They had Evan You, the creator, maintainer. He will definitely be the BFDL and the sole maintainer of Vue for as long as he lives. Weird way to say that. But he had a keynote talk at Vue Toronto where he talked about all the new things that are coming with Vue.js 3.0. This blog post actually got me very excited about Vue.js 3.0. I will not lie. I'm firmly in the React camp. I've tried Angular 1 in the past. I've tried Angular 2 and up in the past. I tried Vue as well, but Vue 3.0 sounds like, again, this is what I love about Vue is they take all the best ideas in the ecosystem and then just kind of just take all those best ideas and then just merge them into this one cohesive view. Pun not intended. But some of
Pun
the
is
things they're doing
always
in,
intended.
it's not, honestly. Sometimes I just fall into it because my brain is so hardwired that way. It's painful. So there's this blog post that
Your poor
highlights.
wife.
Yeah, I know. There's this blog post that's linked in the show notes talking about all the things that Evan's doing with Vue 3.0. It's all the things that every other framework is talking about, such as static tree hoisting, such that if you have in your template in Vue some static content, Vue 3.0, its compiler will actually hoist that static content out such that it doesn't have to be dynamically reran every time your application runs, meaning that you'll actually have a faster application, mostly for free. They're doing proxy-based observation, which means that the way that Vue.js knows when things are being, like when you're rendering a template and you're using some variables, it kind of traces that to know where, like if you say like I want to use foo.bar, it'll say that, oh, you use bar, I'm actually going to set up a watcher so that when bar changes, I'll re-render your template. They were using that before with the object.defined property, which has actually been around since ES5 or ES5, I believe, but they're now switching over to proxies, which is even more robust. However, it's not going to, proxies doesn't support IE11, but they'll have backwards compatibility for IE11, yada yada. It'll be better and faster. With all these new features, they're also going to have it be smaller because they actually can think about it from the ground up. They're rethinking their. I mean, I'm just really excited about this. They're doing this kind of in private right now, which is whatever. It makes them able to move faster. I fully believe, rather than having to like worry about the public community saying, "Wow, what's going on in Vue 3.0?" They can kind of just release it all at once, kind of like how React hooks did. There's pros and cons to both these approaches, but I'm very, very looking forward to when this is actually released to the public because it's very exciting.
I respect your views.
Beautiful. Speaking of frameworks, I'm going to keep going along.
Go for it.
I mentioned React hooks. React hooks we talked about before. There's a React hooks RC, which I feel like this GitHub thread is trying to break the internet. It has over 1,000 comments, and there's been people talking about it back and forth. And then 4 days ago, Sebastian Marpage, hopefully I said that name correctly, did a long and thorough response to all of the concerns and thoughts that people have expressed in that thread, which I thought was the most pragmatic way of addressing the myriad ways of people that have responded, kind of just having this one summation of response. It is a heavy response that I'm not going to go into. I encourage you to read it yourself, but he has dense thoughts. I'm just gonna put it that way. Where I was reading this, and it reminded me of being in college or in high school and having to like read something for homework and having to reread the same sentence 3 times just to actually understand what the heck was being said. He is a smart man. He has good points here. I think the takeaway about this is that I think that not much is going to change. I think is the takeaway. I think that he's acknowledged the concerns that people have had, such as wanting to have hooks usage use names to actually designate where they're used. However, that then breaks the ability to use custom hooks. So there's a counter argument to every argument someone else has put out, which means that that the React team did a good job with React hooks, I think is what it means. So read the response. It's dense, but it's definitely worth your time.
Yeah, it's a hook, line, and sinker.
Bam!
Yeah, so this next topic we can talk about, but I kind of want to note just like how cyclical everything is in just the way the world works. I noticed this earlier when we were talking about TypeScript and how it's becoming just part of the language itself practically, and how 30 years ago everything should have been typed, especially like 20-ish years ago with Java, and then we were like no types, and we had Python and we had JavaScript, and now we're like no comma types. It's just like we want types.
I mean, I think go on.
And the next thing we're about to talk about is someone worked on markup in Rust so that you can have typed HTML within Rust. And this is just this reminds me of the way that templates went in and out of style for so long. We had, there was PHP, and then we said, no more templates. And then we stopped doing templating. And then now we're having different forms of HTML in Rust and Go, which make total sense because they compile down to WASM and can be run in the browser. But I think it's so interesting that like everything goes in and out of style, much like the bagginess of clothing.
Yeah, man. I'm keeping my baggy jeans from the late '90s, hoping that they'll come back in style.
No, they are.
They're already here.
They're already in style. We're just too old.
That's even sadder to hear that we're too old.
Yeah, I realized that next year will be my 10-year high school reunion because that's weird.
Oh man. Same.
Grown-ups.
Yeah, same, Matthew.
Harry's older than me.
Speaking of a war, that wasn't even a segment. That was just like me saying a word.
The war on age.
Yeah. So every year, a bunch of people get together and produce the State of JavaScript survey that they send out and try to get as many responses to kind of get a pulse of how people feel and use and think about JavaScript. And the results of the State of JavaScript 2018 were released this past week. And this website's awesome. Just to start off with, it's cool.
Every year, last year's was cool too. Every year they just do something very interesting.
Yeah, they're not just like, oh, here's data, here's graphs, enjoy. They're like, let me actually take a lot of time and make this a wonderfully interactive experience.
Yeah, definitely poke around all the data. They gave out a bunch of awards, which were really interesting. So the highest satisfaction award went to Jest, with 96.5% of users who used it are willing to use it again. So that's kind of cool.
And then the joke there is great too.
What was the joke?
It's right there.
Oh, Jest proves it's not kidding around. Yeah. People are really excited about GraphQL, but most people haven't done it. So it's just like, it's interesting that that's the thing people are most interested in. React is the most used. Vuex is the most mentioned. Is there a difference between Vue and Vuex?
Vuex is the Redux implementation in Vue that's built into Vue. It's not built into Vue. It's a core maintained. Vuex is to Redux. However, Vuex is maintained by the core maintainers of Vue itself. So it has a little bit tighter integration with Vue itself.
Got it. Yeah, the people are really excited about ReasonML and think that it's up and coming. So I'm interested to see what happens with that. And everyone loves VS Code. The other thing I want to note is if you take a look at this is just like buried down in there, but under utility libraries, Lodash, Moment, jQuery, and even underscore are just like not going anywhere. Like Lodash has 11,500 users. Moment has 11,000 users, which makes sense because time zones are hard. And then I think jQuery is slowly going down, thank God. So is underscore.
Man, I mean, yeah. Look at it. There's a lot of data there. You could spend a lot of time looking at this stuff, but it's definitely interesting. The biggest takeaway that they said themselves was that JavaScript hasn't really changed that much year over year from last year, which is good and bad. It means that for all the people saying that JavaScript moves too fast, it doesn't. So, bully to you.
Yeah, exactly. And then GitHub also put out their own state of the Octaverse. Theirs was the Octaverse, like their GitHub Octocat. Anyway, theirs was much more concerned about what the most popular languages are at the moment. And JavaScript is just killing it.
Crushing it.
Yeah, we are the most popular language. We win.
Everyone go home. You're done.
we won it. We finished it. We're done. JavaScript is the most used language. It's been the most used language by repositories created since 2012. Wow. And Jesus. It's just like the delta between it and the next biggest competitor is just getting bigger. The other thing is TypeScript is considered separate from JavaScript, and that is also gaining. That is now in 7th place. So I think it's quite funny that JavaScript is.
I love this one. This one graph. It's the top programming languages by contributors, and it has Objective C in the 10th spot for 2014, 15, 16. Then it just stops. Just like, so sorry. Swift kind of just stole that from you. It's so sad.
Yeah, I mean, it happens.
Yeah. But take a look at it. It's always cool to see. I mean, it's end of the year. You always get these end of the year posts. So we should probably do an end of the year roundup of our favorite news from the year. That will take a lot of time to do, but It's an
Yeah, we
idea.
could do an end of year episode.
No promises, everybody.
Yeah, we're not going to resolve that promise over the air.
Oh,
Um,
it'll take a while, huh?
yeah, and if we send out an API, we might start it with an infinite for loop.
Go on. I want to hear more about this infinite for loop.
Well, that was just terrible. So there's a great publication, why Facebook's API starts with a for loop. If you open up your debugger and you look at the network panel on Facebook, you will see most of the APIs come down with for and then in brackets a bunch of semicolons. And the reason for this is actually pretty interesting. It protects your data. In earlier browsers, there were ways to hijack JSON and hijack the way objects were read and written to. And there's actually newer security concerns with proxies with this. So if anyone tries to execute an API request as JSON, it just infinite loops out and it just breaks. So it's kind of cool that Facebook does that, and it's a cool article that you should read that we're going to link out to.
Nice. One thing that's not really JavaScript related, but it's one that is near and dear to our hearts as engineers, is Twitter is for the first time talking about maybe possibly adding a edit button for a tweet, which is, the entirety of its lifetime too late. But that'll make our lives, if we have a typo in our tweets, easier, and for you as well. But
Yeah,
it's coming.
I can't type, so.
I mean, I've often had some tweet go viral, and then I look at it like a few hours later, and I'm like, oh, there's a typo. I can't delete that now. That tweet's viral.
Nice. Yeah, speaking of Twitter, there has been some really kind of cool chatter on Twitter the last week about things that you should know if you want to stay relevant in engineering for the next 10 years. And what was so funny about it was it started kind of technical and maybe as a joke, maybe not. There were a lot of jokes of like things from 10 years ago, like what was my favorite one? Remember there was like Ajax, but there was also WSDLs. That's what it was. Someone mentioned this from like 10 years ago that it's like you should pay attention to this. But anyway, so it eventually transitioned into kind of these like soft, and I'm going to put those in air quotes. I'm air quoting even though you can't see me doing it. Soft skills that are really valuable. My favorite one came from Sophie Alpert. She is the EM for the React team at Facebook and is just filled with wisdom. I recommend you follow her. But she said, timeless software engineering skills. Number one, not feeling scared to change code you didn't write. Number two, empathy for your users and your collaborators. And number three, ability to communicate ideas clearly. And then she goes on to say, I'd hire someone with these skills any day. And it's just, like, these are the kinds of things that we don't focus on enough in engineering, but we don't need any, like, jerk rock stars. Like, we have enough of those. We did that for a decade. We need good people now.
I agree. I mean, it was a fun little trend. It got a little bit out of hand, and I fully agree with these 3 points. The first one, not feeling scared to change code you didn't write, that was a skill that I learned the hard way early on in my career, and it's ones that once you experience it, they kind of stick with you. So if you can shortcut your way to learning these things, it'll definitely make you a better person first, honestly, and then a better engineer second.
Yeah, and also if someone is going to hassle you about changing code that they wrote strictly because they wrote it, you're probably in a bad environment. I'm not gonna.
They're gonna give you a bad time. Let's just
Yeah.
put it that way. But to not end on such a sad note, we always love our segment that ends each episode of Matthew's Jokes. Matthew's Jokes. This is the theme song for Matthew's Jokes.
Wow, I've never had my jokes embraced before. This is great. So,
Well, I mean, if we're gonna do it, we gotta embrace it and make it real.
I've been embracing it since day one. You just haven't embraced it. I am so excited. So
I just was not used to it, man. Now I'm used to it.
Okay, cool. So anyway, I'm gonna read some tweets that I found. The first one is from Chris K5000, and he goes, he almost made fun of an electrician today. Because is it an electrician's guild rule that you have to perform 5 minutes of ritual complaining about what was the previous electrician thinking before you're allowed to fix anything? But then I remembered I'm a software engineer. And we just like all spend like the first like hour of looking at any code complaining about what was the previous engineer thinking.
I mean,
So
the gift I always give whenever I leave a company to all my coworkers is, if anything goes wrong, it's my fault. Bye bye.
yeah, you can just Harry and I once worked together, and he did say that when he left.
And then I put a cigar in my mouth and kind of like shuffled outside in the style of an old 20s cartoon.
And then we got like 3 months of being allowed to blame all problems on Harry, even though they weren't his fault. They were probably mine. Okay, next joke. This one is a pun. What do you call a pasta eating hacker?
A pasta eating hacker.
A penne tester.
That's very topical for Italy. That's good.
Yeah, and it's very topical for, I don't know, the security things and the UDP discussion we had, and there's going to be some issues with HTTP 3. And I was talking to my buddy Nicholas, and I asked him what was the network problem, and he said it was not working.
That's a big groan for me. It's a very big groan.
Well, you know what? I'm proud of it. Anyway, thank you for listening. I am going to go catch a flight to Florida, which is not an exciting place, but it is where I am from. So I will see my family for this holiday. Harry, do you have anything to say?
Just thank you for being listeners. Let us know how your holidays go, if you celebrate them, and let us know what you think about this episode. Keep tweeting at us. We love it. We want to hear more from you. Anything that really tickles our fancies, we'll definitely include in the episode so you can hear your lovely Twitter handle be broadcast over everyone's ears.
Oh, shameless plug. My talk from React Next is now available. It is pinned on my Twitter profile. And the first thing I do in that talk is beg for Twitter followers. So.
One last thing. We're now on Spotify as well. I should have said that at the top of the show, but maybe I'll do that next time. We are now on Spotify. So if you use Spotify, you can now listen to us on Spotify.
Yeah, we are there for as long as we are there, which is a while.
Bye, everyone. Thank you again. We'll see you again next week.
Peace out.